Bonjour, welcome to Wahsa Distance Education Center's radio Zoom classes. This is SVN3E, grade 11 Workplace Science, and I'm Bronwyn Slate. If you'd like to participate live today, you're welcome to call the Wahsa studio at 1-800-465-7144 or 737-4017. You can listen on the radio at 91.9 FM or on the television at Bell Express View channel 972. You're always welcome to join me live through the Zoom link, which is available from me, your teacher, and also your DEC. Our classes are scheduled Monday through Thursday from 3 to 4 in the afternoon, and we are now in our 4th week of our 9-week course. At this point, you should start to be thinking about submitting your work. So a reminder that you submit the key questions, which are all listed at the end of each IL lesson. So you need to do all of them. Some of them are check your understanding questions, some of them are activities, and some of them are review questions. So show all of your work, explain all your steps in your thinking. Make sure that you're actually answering the question that is asked. And you're welcome to do this either by hand or electronically. I'm fine if you want to write in your workbook. There isn't a lot of space, but if you would like to do that, if that works for you, that is fine. If you'd like to type it up in either Word or Google Doc is the easiest way for me to read. Access those files, but if you're going to use a different program, I'm sure it's fine. Just let me know so that we can figure out to make sure that I can access your work. There are 3 different methods for submitting your work. The first is to scan and send your work in electronically. So if you are writing in the workbook or writing it out by hand, if you have a smartphone, you can scan through either the Notes app on iPhones or on Android phones, the Google Drive app. If you don't have a smartphone or you aren't comfortable using the scan functions, that's fine. You can take a picture. Just the scanning, it will make it a smaller file, which will be easier to send. Then you can either email it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca and CC it to bronwyn.slate@nnec.on.ca. Or you can send it to me through Facebook Messenger at bslatewahsa. The second method is to drop off your work in Sioux Lookout. So we have an outdoor mailbox at 74 Front Street. We're the bright red building next to the post office. And we have a small white mailbox next to our side entrance. Third method is to hand your work into your DEC. Then your DEC can either send your work through the Express or fax it to 807-737-1732 or through fax to 1-800-463-7852. If you'd like to connect with me through social media, both my Facebook and my YouTube channel are under the name B Slate Wahsa. Then all of our radio Zoom classes are posted to YouTube after airing, and they're under a playlist called SVN3E, and I share that through Facebook. Also, I have a supplementary video list of all of the videos that I show in class. So if you'd like to just rewatch those videos or take a glance at them and connect to see what other ones there might be that might be useful, there's a list there under our playlist. There's another list within our playlist that shows all of those, that organizes all of those videos. So you can also get the original sources. Science is really visual. I try to have as many visuals to see what's going on to connect our brain in different ways. Listening and reading words is definitely useful, but connecting it visually is really how our brains, having all the pieces is really how our brains learn. So I'd strongly advise you to connect with the videos, either joining me live through Zoom or watching the replays on YouTube. If you don't have access to reliable internet, let me know and I can send you a recording of the videos, and hopefully you can then access them without having to use up internet. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact me. Our course is going to rapidly come to an end. May and June will fly by, I'm sure. So reach out if you're struggling with anything in order to get your course done. My email address is bronwyn.slate, which is spelled BRONWYN.SLATE@nnec.on.ca. My Facebook is B Slate Wahsa. You can call me at the office at 807-737-1488, extension 2209. My extension is working now, so you can leave me a message and I will get it. You can also call toll free at 1-800-667-3703 and use the extension 2209. My office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So I will get back to you as soon as I can. As always, I'd like to start our class with my positionality in order to frame my understanding of science and of education and the biases that I come with. So I am a white settler. I have white settler ancestry, and that means that I have white privilege, and that shapes the way that I understand both education and science in particular. Well, anyway, any subject. So that's just, though I'm trying to recognize that and work against that, that is my natural state. And there are things that I'm going to miss, definitely. I do live in Northwestern Ontario on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe peoples, and I try to honor those teachings and learn as much as I can, but I do not have a wealth of knowledge at all. I am only scratching the surface as I start to dive into this rich culture. And even so, there are certain things that are not appropriate for me to understand or have access to. So I recognize that, and that's going to affect the way that I'm able to teach, particularly science and the teachings that are connected to science. This also is my first time teaching this course, so I do have lots to learn and also unlearn. The ways that I come to science are from a Eurocentric ideal, which is not necessarily the most useful or the deepest of understandings. It's not a wide understanding. And so I'm working on unlearning that so that I can relearn new things and integrate that into this course. Also, our textbook is Eurocentric. I've noticed reading it that much of it is positioning European scientists as the holders of valuable knowledge, and they ignore Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis knowledges and experiences, which I think is really problematic. So I try to integrate those into, as much as I can understand, integrate that into our lessons here together. Also, there may be some problematic language. I don't believe I've come across much yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do have problematic language at some point. So is there anything that anybody noticed and would like to be addressed, please let me know, and I can address that and work to improve our course and make it more culturally appropriate. All right, so we're on Unit 3, which we started last lesson, which is the environmental effects on humans. So in this unit, we're learning about the factors in the environment that cause diseases in humans. And then we're going to learn about vaccines and other ways to protect ourselves from these factors. So last lesson, we learned more about environmental effects, so more about pollution in various ways. And today we're going to be learning about how the body functions a little bit more. And then in our next lesson, we'll be learning a little bit more about how those bodily functions take in pollutants and how that has an effect on us. So this one really is about learning about how humans function, and a little bit about, we can make some connections about how the environmental impacts on us, but it's really just learning about sort of a biology focus, but learning about how our bodies function so that we can think about how we impact them with the contaminants in our environments. So our lesson is number 9, and it's called How Environmental Contaminants Enter the Body. So our learning goals are that at the end of this lesson, you will understand how the human body functions, and you'll be able to describe how the human body defends itself against contaminants. So you know that you've met our learning goals because you can explain how the respiratory, digestive, skin, and circulatory systems work, and you can explain how the human body's systems defend against contaminants, but also how they are vulnerable to them. So to start off, just thinking about what we do. So doing seemingly harmless things like breathing air, drinking water, enjoying dinner, cleaning up after in your neighborhood, may also be exposing yourself to pollutants, poison, and pathogens. So these environmental contaminants have come into our surroundings due to our activities. We have created this pollution. And they are contaminants because they do not naturally exist in our surroundings or not at the levels created by our activities. So there might be some of the chemical or the element in our natural environment, but because of things that we have done, humans have done, we've increased that, and that makes it poisonous or contaminates our environments. So once it's in our environment, these contaminants can get into our bodies through various ways and seriously harm our health. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So first, we're going to be looking at how this happens through the respiratory system. So the respiratory system is our breathing. So we have inhalation, which is breathing air in, and exhalation, which is breathing air out. So we need to do both of these to live, but we need to figure out how it actually works, because most of us, we don't think about it. None of us think about it. That's how it works, is that we don't have to think about it so that we can keep living. But what is actually going on? So when we inhale, we take air in through our nose or our mouth. And then from there, it goes through passageways connecting your nose and mouth to your lungs. These passageways are called your pharynx, trachea, and bronchial tubes. This lesson, you're going to learn that I'm not super great at reading scientific names. I'll do my best, but if you're concerned about pronunciation, please look it up. And just doing a Google search with pronunciation will give you a pronunciation that's likely to be more accurate than mine. I do apologize. I'm working on it, but it's just not a strength of mine. Then once it's in our lungs, a chest muscle called the diaphragm contracts to make that movement happen. And then when it relaxes after the air intake, it forces the air from your lungs back through your mouth or your nose as you exhale. So here is a diagram of the respiratory system. You don't need to know all of this language, but just sort of having a general idea of what's going on. So your mouth, your nose, your pharynx, which is your throat, your trachea, which is like your windpipe, your bronchial tubes, which are connecting to your lungs, and then your diaphragm, which is down here at the bottom, all work together as part of your respiratory system. So this is a system that brings air from your environment into your body. The bronchial tubes that lead into your lungs branch into smaller and smaller tubes. So you can see here on the diagram, your bronchial tubes are outside your lungs and inside your lungs. They're smaller and smaller. And eventually they end in tiny little sacs called alveoli. I'm not saying that right. I tried. I don't remember how to say it. So that's here at the end of in your lungs, these little sacs here. We're going to watch a video that's hopefully going to have some of the proper pronunciation. The alveoli are surrounded by a network of very fine blood vessels called capillaries. The walls of the alveoli and capillaries are so thin that gases pass between them. So it passes into your blood and through these sacs. So then here's a little bit of a closer look up at it. So this tube is the bronchial, and then you can see that these are the sacs at the end. And the capillaries are these sort of looks like a net here, which are part of your veins and your arteries, right? So your blood is coming in, it's oxygen deficient, so it needs oxygen. It trades oxygen, and then the blood pumps out after it's got oxygen. So then looking even closer, you can see here, that's where this transfer happens, that the oxygen comes out and then the carbon dioxide goes in. And again, we're going to watch a video that shows this. So the oxygen in the air passes through the alveoli walls and dissolves in your blood. The blood transfers this oxygen to your body cells to allow them to carry out cellular respiration. This process by which cells combine oxygen with sugar to get energy. The waste products from the reaction are carbon dioxide and water. So your blood transports the carbon dioxide and water to the capillaries, covering the alveoli, and then they transfer to your lungs and exhale. So that's how we exhale carbon dioxide. Okay, so I have just explained it. We've looked at some diagrams. We're going to watch a TED Ed video as well to just see, we can see it in action if you're able to watch the video, and just have it a little bit of another perspective. I find that having these in different ways helps us to understand hearing it a couple of times in slightly different ways. There may be some language in this video that you don't need to remember. That's okay. We're getting a whole picture of understanding how our lungs work and how our breathing works. So it's okay if you don't pick it all up. Okay, let's just see if it's going to work for me. It's not. 1 second.
Many of us have hundreds of things on our minds at any moment, often struggling to keep track of everything we need to do. But fortunately, there's one we don't have to worry about. We transport oxygen to the body's cells to keep them moving. Keeps the body alive. So the structures and tissues make up organs, as well as repairs other places. And to get this machine
Okay, so that was just another walkthrough of how it works. And again, if you weren't able to watch the video, I'd strongly encourage you to go check it out. I'll link it in our show notes, and which I'll share, just because then it's a really good way of actually seeing that transfer of carbon dioxide and oxygen, which just makes a lot of sense. Okay, so then what are your body's defenses against inhaled contaminants? So inhaling, breathing in contaminants is one way that we bring toxins into our body. But our bodies are built to protect us from this. So our nasal passages and upper bronchial tubes are lined with special cells. These cells secrete mucus and have moving hair-like projections called cilia. The mucus traps many particles, bacteria, and dust that we inhale. So that's part of why we have nose hairs, right? And continued through our trachea to protect, to keep those things out. The cilia move those particles in waves into the nose and throat. From there, the body can expel them from sneezing or coughing, which many of us can relate. So here you can see it. This is inside your trachea, right? This is a zoom in of your throat. And then you can see that these little hairs like things, cilia move any particles, and the mucus move it up. And then you can cough it out if your body is rejecting it. However, cilia and mucus can only defend our bodies against low doses of airborne particles for a short time. we have little to no defense against other airborne contaminants like VOCs or pesticides, which we've talked about before. When our limited defenses are broken down or do not exist, these contaminants can get into our bodies. So our bodies can only do so much. If we continue to expose ourselves to more and more contaminants, if we are unhealthy, we have disease based on various reasons, then our defenses are broken down and we can't protect ourselves as well. And then we can get sick further. So here you can see a diagram where we have good air quality compared to high ozone levels. So here in this zooming up in terms of the air sacs, we can see that the healthy lungs have wide open pathways. So it's really easy to move that air in and out to those air sacs, which then can transfer the oxygen to the blood cells and take the carbon dioxide away. But here in the second one, where we have high ozone levels, so high, thick, contaminated air means that we've inhaled. These tubes have now shrunk. They're contracted. And so the pathways for air are narrowed, and that means that breathing is difficult. So it's hard to get enough air into these pathways and then transfer that oxygen to our blood and taking that carbon dioxide away. So that's just an interesting way of looking at it in terms of the impacts on our actual body when we have so many contaminants in our air. So now if you'd like to pause the video, you can do the key questions on page 71, the check your understanding questions 1 and 2, that talk about inhalation and exhalation, and then trachea and bronchial tubes. Okay, so now we've talked about the respiratory system. Let's talk about the digestive system. So your digestive system is about eating and drinking, right? So we need to breathe to live, but we also need to eat food and drink liquids to live. So the process of eating and drinking is called ingestion. And when you ingest food, you begin the process of digestion. Digestion involves breaking food down into smaller and smaller pieces in order to get chemical nutrients that your body can absorb. The organs and glands that do this make up your digestive system. So again, here is another visual of our digestive system, and we're going to go through the different parts that are involved. So digestion begins when you chew your food. So you put food in your mouth, and then your food is coated with saliva. Saliva is a digestive juice that helps to moisten and break down your food. So those come from these salivary glands in your mouth. Then when you swallow, food and drink pass through a long tube called the esophagus and into your stomach. Then your stomach is a muscular sac packed with glands. So again, these glands in your stomach secrete digestive fluid known as gastric juices. So it is a muscle, so it like squeezes and compresses and moves around, breaks down your food. And then also it adds juices, gastric fluid, that helps breaks down your food particles. So then the muscles of the stomach churn the food and gastric juice into a thick liquid, and the liquid leaves the stomach to enter the small intestine, which is this part in here. The small intestine is called the small intestine because it is small in diameter, not in length. It is long in length, but small in diameter. So it's narrow, it's a smaller tube, a long, small tube, whereas the large intestine is a wider, shorter tube. So the small intestine is a long folded tube. Its walls are lined with muscles, glands, and millions of tiny projections. As liquefied food enters the small intestine, it is mixed with new digestive substances. These come via ducts from the liver and pancreas, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. So your liver is up here, and your pancreas is back here. It's this yellow part back here. The liver, so here we can see the liver is this large red organ. It produces bile. The excess bile is stored in the gallbladder, which is his little organ here. And the bile helps the body to break down and absorb fats. So our body needs fats to survive. So the bile from your liver helps break that so that we can use it in useful way. Then the pancreas, which is this kind of looks like a pine cone shape, this organ here, produces substances that break down carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, also all things that we need to survive. So both pancreas and liver are important organs for our digestion. Then the glands in the small intestines produce substances that, again, help complete digestion. They also give rise to the tiny projections called the villi that line the intestinal wall. Villi are broken up into even finer projections, and the walls are both very thin. So on the other side of these walls are tiny capillaries. So just like before with our oxygen being drawn through those into the capillaries so that we can transfer oxygen to our blood, this is through the walls of the small intestine. The capillaries is where how most of our nutrients are absorbed into our body, which is what we need to live. Once in the capillaries, the nutrients and any contaminants that get through them are carried to your cells. So through the small intestines, everything, all the nutrients that we need go absorb into our body, but also anything that is toxic has potential to absorb through our body there as well. Then food that cannot be absorbed through the small intestine passes into the large intestine. So it's worked all the way through this long small intestine, and now it's in the large intestine. The large intestine is a muscular tube that is larger in diameter, but shorter than the small intestine, like I said before. And it mainly absorbs water from the undigested food, and it compacts the leftover waste as feces. Then the muscle at the bottom of the large intestine or rectum contracts to push feces out of our bodies, and this is done through the anus. And that's how we remove the waste from our body. Okay, so now again, we're going to watch another TED video because I'm a big fan of how the digestion system works. Again, to watch sort of how this works and to hear another perspective. Remember, you may not need to know all the language, but it just gives you a holistic view of what's going on and helping understand how our body digests both our food and our drink, but also any toxins that we take into we ingest as well. Sorry, no sounds. Well, let's go back and actually have some sound. Makes it better.
Across the whole planet, humans eat on average 2.7 kilograms of food a day. That's over 365 kilograms a year per person. Covering 9 years and containing over 20 specialized cell types. This is one of the most diverse systems. The digestive system has first, there's the gastrointestinal. Using an array of special juices. The body's enzymes. Process begins before Enzymes also carry out the final deconstruction of proteins into amino acids and carbohydrates into glucose. This happens in small intestines, lower regions, and the digestive. If you found more work.
All right, so that just gives us a little bit more of a visual and another perspective. Again, there are lots of language in there that you don't need to know, but hopefully I think that the watching it actually happen drives the point home. So again, watching the videos to see what's actually going on is I think it's really gonna support you in terms of understanding all the process. Okay, so then what are the body's defenses against ingesting contaminants? So the first defense that we have against contaminants that we might have ingested is vomiting. So rejecting them. So during vomiting, the contents from the middle of the small intestine and up are forcefully thrown out of the mouth. We usually vomit because something makes us sick. Vomiting lets the body get rid of any poisons or pathogens. So it goes through, that digestive process, we can see it goes through part of it already. And then if our body's rejecting it, it projects that out of our body. And the second defense is the liver. The liver constantly filters the blood. So it removes poisons such as alcohol and drugs that get across the villi, as well as pathogens. So that's why our liver is really, really important. However, again, it can only cope with small amounts at a time. So our defenses against contaminants in food and drink are limited. So even though our body is trying really hard to keep us safe, if we ingest things too much of a contaminant, then it's still possible that it can be toxic to our body because our bodies can only do so much. All right, so now you're able to do the key questions on page 74, the check your understanding questions 1 and 2. Now we're going to look at through the skin. So your skin structure is your first line of defense against the outside world. So when you're hurt, it takes the bulk of the injury, and by doing so, protects your other body parts. It keeps out insects, pathogens, hot and cold, wet and dry. However, it can also absorb certain oils, gases, and medicines into the body. So here's looking at an image of the skin structure, and we're going to look at the parts. So your skin has 3 layers. The epidermis, which is the top layer. Then the dermis, which is the bulk of it, the middle layer. And then the hypodermis, or also known as subcutaneous, which is the bottom layer, which is made up a lot of fat cells, which are essential to our bodies. So then our skin also has hair follicles and shafts and other pore sweat glands, and ducts. And we'll look at these a little bit more. So the epidermis, the top layer, is on the top of the top layer, has a layer of dead cells that we can see. The top of our skin, what we actually see is dead cells. And then the bottom layer of the epidermis are growing cells. The dead cells slowly wear off through normal activity. We lose dead cells constantly. And as they do, the cells from the bottom layer replace them. Then your hair and nails grow out of deep valleys in the epidermis. As you can see in this image, the hair follicles. And each hair shaft has a CBS or oil gland along its side. So then the oil here helps to keep your skin moist and looking healthy. Then the dermis layer, the middle layer, contains the capillaries and nerve endings that let you feel sensations. Also has many elastic fibers that connect with one another to make connective tissue. The tissue makes the skin thicker and strong. And the sweat glands in the dermis help to keep the body cool. The fat cells in the subcutaneous layer, in the bottom hypodermis layer, are helped to insulate our body from the cold. All right, so then we're going to watch one final video about the science of skin. Again, there's elements of this that you don't need to know, but it just gives us a good understanding of what's going on. Just get it to work.
Between you and the rest of the world lies an interface that makes up 16% of your physical weight. This is your skin, the largest organ in the body. Made out of flat, it would cover close to 1.7 square meters of ground. Its purpose is simple: taking our inside skin. Skin is the foundation of the containment. This surface is also the respiratory Says now, the integratory system may be many things, but it's certainly more than skin. Now that we've covered your outer shell, I want to get to know your insides a little bit.
All right. So now let's talk about, now that we understand sort of how our skin works and how it can absorb different things, let's talk about the problem with absorption. So skin can absorb oils, tars, alcohols, cleaning products, and pesticides. These substances can harm the skin's layers and get into the capillaries. Like the contaminants that get into your blood through the respiratory and the digestive systems, they can be carried to the body cells. The harm to your health from any of these points of entry, whether it's inhalation, ingestion, or absorption, can be really serious. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the circulatory system, because once we have taken in contaminants, your circulatory system is likely going to spread it around your body. So your circulatory system consists of your heart, your arteries, and your veins and your capillaries. So your arteries are your oxygenated blood. So on this diagram, the red lines. So coming from being pumped from your heart out to your body with the oxygen. And then once they have given away their oxygen, then the blood comes back through your veins in the blue lines that are on this diagram. Then they come back into your heart, get oxygen like we saw through the respiratory system, and then go back pumped out through the arteries again. So this is how your blood is carried throughout your body. The heart is the pump that moves blood through the arteries and capillaries, and then this blood is returned to the heart through the veins. The blood carries oxygen, nutrients, and sometimes contaminants to the cells in your body. So if at any point your blood is taking in contaminants, then it's going to move throughout your body and impact various organs and various parts of your body. So how contaminants spread through your circulatory system. In addition to its other duties, the blood fights pathogens like bacteria and viruses that can get through your skin when it's wounded. Wounds that penetrate the skin are the most serious. So they may be caused by sharp objects or insects or animal bites, and contaminants get into your blood can then harm your blood. They may also be carried to your body's other organs, tissues, and systems, because your blood goes everywhere, right? So for example, your nervous system, which includes your brain, can be affected even if you get contaminant in somewhere other place, but then your blood carries that contaminant to your brain. So contaminants in your blood can lead to serious health problems. It's really concerning. Okay, so that's how our body works. Not all of the systems, but most of the primary systems that our body works, and how we can be concerned about inhaling, ingesting, and absorbing contaminants. In our next lesson, we're going to talk more about the systems now that we understand how they work and what contaminants are likely to affect them, what our symptoms are and what the risks are, and then the resulting diseases based on how those contaminants work through our systems. So today for lesson 9, we talked about our body systems. So we focus specifically on the respiratory system, so how we breathe, the digestive system, how our food and liquids are processed, our skin, which is our first line of defense against most contaminants, and then our circulatory system, which moves our blood throughout our bodies, which also potentially moves contaminants throughout our bodies that we get through our body by our breathing in, inhalation, digestive, ingestion, or your skin absorption. Then they go into your circulatory system and move throughout your body. So our body does have defenses, but our body can defend against small amounts of contaminants. So we can't say just because we have some defense that we're immune or we are still vulnerable to them. So that's important to remember. And then also if our systems become dysfunctional, we can lose our defenses. So our minimal defenses that we do have, which is fine for most of us, and is fine in a world where we don't have lots of contaminants, it works fine. But if we pollute our environments more and more, our systems become dysfunctional, and then we lose any of the defenses that we do have. So our first success criteria are that you can explain the respiratory, digestive, skin, and circulatory systems and how they work. Our second is that you can explain how the body's defense system, how their systems, defend against contaminants, but also how they all are vulnerable to them. So hopefully you can describe both, understand both how our bodies work, but then also how they are vulnerable to contaminants and defend against them. All right, so now you should be able to do the key questions on page 77, questions 1 through 13. Again, you're likely going to need to use another paper because some of them are a little bit longer, but if you want to write them in a book, that is fine too. As always, if you have any questions or concerns you'd like to talk about this lesson more, please reach out and ask me questions and we can chat. My phone number is 807-737-1488, extension 2209. You can also call toll free at 1-800-667-3703. You can reach me by email at bronwyn.slate, which is spelled BRONWYN.SLATE@nnec.on.ca. You can connect with me through Facebook at bslate Wahsa, and you can find a replay of this video on YouTube at bslate Wahsa. Also, I will link the YouTube links for the TED Ed videos as well in my show notes for this lesson, as well as putting them on the supplementary video list. Potentially, YouTube might have a copyright issue, and so they might cut them out of our video when we play. That happens sometimes, but then you can still just access them through the show notes and just watch them straight from YouTube and TED Ed, which is totally fine. We're all for making sure that people have their intellectual property, so I'm not trying to steal them, just trying to connect you to them. My office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So please reach out during those times if you'd like to connect with me. If that doesn't work, send me a message either through email or Facebook, or leave me a voicemail, and we can try to arrange a time that might work for you. If you can't reach me if you're not available between 9 and 4, we can work to see what might work for both of us. I hope you have a lovely day. Thanks so much for joining me. Miigwech.